The morning masterpiece. It is strawberry, mandarin, a little bit of the regular orange, and banana. And today, James will be finishing off his review on Plato, whatever that.
Yeah. I think you said Epictetus.
Sure. I'll eat my waffle.
You don't want to
Which doesn't
talk
look as
about
pretty as
anything in the news or anything like that?
Nope. Just go ahead.
Yeah. So we talked before about how this book is missing 32 pages. It has double the pages from, I think it was 29 to something like 62. 29, 61 maybe.
Yep. They needed somebody in
60.
quality control.
Yeah. Even though this is a Harvard Classic registered edition, no less. I presume it has something to do with Harvard University. It's put out by P.F. Collier and Son Corporation, so it's actually Collier's is something that used to put out, maybe still does, puts out an encyclopedia. There's another series. I think it's related to the University of Chicago. It's maybe the more famous one, Great Books or something like that. And it's maybe has a bit higher quality control. I'll be reviewing some of those books. And it's put out by the Encyclopedia Britannica Public. I think it's related to the University of Chicago. So it looks as though this is another kind of like encyclopedic thing. So Collier's is less prestigious than the Encyclopedia Britannica, but which might be the original encyclopedia in English, even though they call it Britannica, not Anglica, because I think it originated in Scotland. So the Scottish people are Brits, but they're not English, definitely not. The English colonized that. They were settler colonials, so starting about 500 AD. They're not native to what are called sometimes the British Isles. Thank you. And so this one thing that isn't mentioned in the on the cover is the Hymn of Cleanthes. It also has, or Cleanthes, probably Cleanthes. It's a Stoic classic, I guess. It kind of didn't seem that great to me when I went through. It's just 2 pages that's been preserved. And so it has the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And I don't know, I'm just not that impressed with Stoicism. I'm not that impressed with Plato. I'm not that impressed with Aristotle. The funny sort of thing is many of the classics preserved from Greek stuff are actually conservatives. It's weird. I don't know if it's fair to characterize Aristotle as conservative, but Plato I consider quite conservative. The guy who wrote Anabasis or Anabasis, he was a conservative, kind of like aristocrat, believed in aristocracy. But the weird thing is, it was the democracy amongst the 10,000 that saved them from, first of all, being totally whacked by the Persians.
Yep.
And then saved them. They kind of elected new leaders after their leaders had surrendered to the Persians. And they were saying, they were surrounded by the Persians. They'd won the battle in Persia, right in the middle, but it's really in the middle of Iraq, so near the Persian capital. And they'd won the battle. but their guy that come in to support, I think, was Cyrus, the younger brother of the Persian emperor. It said they said to the guys that come in with Cyrus, well, which one of you, we won the battle, which one of you wants to be the new Persian emperor? They're all too cowardly to. And the Greeks are going, wow, we're in trouble. So the Persians then regrouped, and they surrounded them, and they said to the Greeks, hey, like, surrender, and we'll let you go back to Greece. And, they had a council, the Greeks did. The Persians were too scared of them to come in, because when they come in after them, they'd already had their rear ends kicked, even though the Greeks were hugely outnumbered. And the Greeks had a council of war, kind of like, and they've discussed it. That's what you do in democracy. They're saying, hey, like, if they let us go back home, they'll realize it's just an encouragement for mercenaries. They're mercenaries that are doing this for money, to come on in and do the same sort of thing. They'll never let that fly. And the Greek leaders they surrendered, and of course they got killed. So the Greeks had another council of war, the surviving ones, which is the vast majority. And they said, what do we do? Well, they got new leaders, elected new leaders, and then they said, okay, we're going to have to tramp out of here. And they decided to go the shortest route to places that were held by Greece, which was the northern coast of present-day Turkey, that were Greek, I suppose they were called something like colonies, but they'd be more like enclaves where they'd, emporia, where they'd trade with the locals inland. And they made it out of there. Now the vast majority of them died, but many of them survived. It's one of the great stories, but of all time. But I gather of the four great tragic playwrights, three of them were conservatives. Conservatives. They're aristocrats. They supported aristocracy over the aristocrats themselves. It's one of the weird things. We tend to think of these as being the glories of Athens, and Athens being the glory of Greece. But I think actually the places where science was developed was more like present-day Western Turkey. And yeah, Western Turkey, the natives there, from what we can tell, the earliest sources, the Hittite sources, seem to indicate there were Greeks there. Were Greeks? The Turks came along when we look at the Hittite sources, and this is even on a revised dating. 2,000 years before the Turks made it there. 2,000 years. Okay, 2,000 years. And that was, the Turks came there only 1,000 years ago. The Greek claims the western part of Turkey, I'm not saying that it's extensive areas there, but the western part of Turkey would be 3 times as ancient as the earliest Turkish claims. And understand, when the Hittites are mentioning Greeks there in the western part of Turkey, that's no guarantee that's when the Greeks moved in. They might have been there 1,000 years before, roughly 1,000 BC, more like 900 BC. Is that registering? So I'll show you a little picture of Marcus Aurelius. He looks kind of like a sane, sensible critter. There you go. I believe that's him, Emperor Marcus Aurelius. I left the emperor off. There's a Stoicism. It's kind of like, hey, it's a little bit like Buddhism. Almost certainly not influenced one way or another. Marcus Aurelius came after Buddha. It's a significant margin, well over. Even on a revised downward dating, slight downward dating of Buddha, maybe about 500 years after. But the basic idea of Stoicism seems to be, hey, life's tough enough already. Life's full of pain, and woe, and all this sort of stuff. But, like, it's all in your head. Heaven is in your head, hell is in your head. you know, you only make things worse by whining and complaining and feeling pain. You know, it's basically all in your head. What? You know, like Marcus Aurelius, there's a passage in here, isn't it? Meditations. Now, you know, I don't want to judge him too harshly because apparently he wasn't a philosopher in the sense that he was had a school, he was teaching people this, apparently for his own use. And but there's one passage where he's saying, you know, like it's kind of silly for a person who's going to be sent to fight. The way he puts it, I think, is fight the animals, presumably in the Colosseum. But there were other places where the Romans had people fight the animals. You know, it's kind of like a one-sided fight. You get all torn up by a lion or whatever, pride. And he's saying it's kind of silly for him to be doing that. Hey, anyone out there who believes in Stoicism, you go kicking and fighting. It's like, do not go peaceful into that good night, because you never know what's going to happen. You know, like someone in the amphitheater there, the Colosseum, might put their thumbs up or something like that. They might think that you've fought well against the lions or something like that. I don't know if they ever did that. It did happen with the gladiators, apparently, if you fought well, and the other guy had basically beaten you up and was getting ready to deliver the coup de grace. You know, they put their thumbs up if you fought well, and you live to fight another day. So you just never can tell. And here's this idiot who could have actually, he could have closed down the games if he was really such an awesome, cosmic, nice guy. He could have closed the games down. He would have been pretty unpopular with the general run-of-the-mill of the people, but hey, he could have at least tried it. And then no, he's saying, hey, you know, like that guy, he should just go peacefully into that good night, you know, like when he's fighting the lions, just, you know.
There must be a bun in the yard, because the bushes keep shaking.
Oh, yeah. Maybe it's a low-lying bird. In this yard, it's not advisable for birds to hang down low. See, there's a cat over there.
Cat over there.
Yeah. Anyway, you know, like that kind of stoicism, like pain is just in your head. Wow, garbage. And you know, like Marcus Aurelius, good guy, not so good guy, bad guy. Well, you know, like during his reign, there was persecution of the Jews. You know, like it wasn't all the way through where they're persecuting Jews. It was folks like, I believe, Diocletian. Oh, that was more like Christians. But Hadrian, you know, like persecuted, he ethnically cleansed them. 135 AD, and he was a man of class. You know, you look at some of the stuff that he put up, Rome, outside Rome, it's awesome, but he's a classless kind of guy, persecuted small minority, defenseless minority. Mm-hmm. And here Marcus Aurelius, at the very least, let it happen. He might have been persecution of the was it the Jews or Christians? I forgot. I just woke up. You'll have to excuse me. I'll check it out. It's probably the Christian. But shameful. You know, a small defenseless minority. And just absolutely inexcusable. If it was just systemic persecution, he could have closed it down. But I suspect it was systematic. So Stoicism, at least as propounded by Marcus Aurelius, not very impressive. Epictetus, they were kind of opposed to the Epicureans. Epicureans, you know, like modern day science seems to have been influenced more by the Epicurean view of the world than anything else. The Epicurean stuff seems to have been, you know, like enjoy life while it can. It's kind of like supposed to be hedonistic. but which I think hedonistic comes from the Greek root meaning sweet. I wouldn't be surprised if actually we're cognate the root for hedonistic with the word sweet. I wouldn't be surprised if there weren't. Just a little thought. But it's weird that hedonism and stoicism seem to have been the two main philosophical streams of things that came out of or were preserved in the Roman world. I'm not going to say they originated either of those things. Stoicism is named after Stoa, which I believe is a building where people of that particular bent met, and that's in Athens. And hedonism, well, that's a Greek name, so it would have existed well before Marcus Aurelius, and frankly, probably well before the Romans really started becoming a plague on the world, and that might be like 200 BC. And the Romans didn't have much literature before them. Weirdly enough, it was the playwrights like Plato and Terence that were first kind of like almost like classics. It's the pre-classical Roman stuff. The Romans weren't much on plays, though that's like the beginning, and then they just, I think maybe they were more interested in when they were going to, for a spectacle, for going to the amphitheaters, the Colosseum, the smaller venues to watch people suffer and die. They actually would flood the Colosseum. That's amazing. Like, apparently it seated roughly 50,000 people. And they'd actually have naumachias, which are Navy fights. So they'd have battles, kind of like fake battles, presumably people were dying. In the flooded Colosseum. It's stunning what they were able to do. Well, it was 2,000 years ago. But they were civilized in a certain way, living in cities, a large city. I don't know how big Rome was. I mean, their Circus Maximus in Rome apparently held 250,000 people. So Rome's population at that point in time was presumably more than 250,000. A million might be a bit much of an overestimation. But not very civilized when it came to war and peace, when it came to slavery, when it came to what you did with prisoners, either criminals or captured enemies and stuff like that. Get sent to the Colosseum, get to fight lions, get to fight each other, whatnot. Not very civilized, and from what I can tell, actually, the so-called Western civilization suffered a major downturn during their when they took over from Greece. Their empire was wrong too. It was, like Edward Said, right in 1978, I believe it was. Maybe it was more interviews that followed that, which led to his fame, or as I'd say, it should have been infamy. Certainly a person. He preferred, and he said this I think more than once, empires that expanded by adjacence, as opposed to the Western European empires of the so-called modern age. Wow, that's amazing. We're seeing what empires that proceed by adjacence are like right now with Russia. They hold on much, much, much more strongly than the ones that proceeded by jumping from one emporia to another, like the Western European powers. Like, you notice how, like how many, who died when the English left India in 1947? it was Pakistanis, newly formed, minted Pakistanis, and newly minted Indians. They were killing each other. The English weren't killing them. I don't know too many English people are going strutting around saying, hey, let's conquer India and Pakistan again, because we have a right to that. But you look at Putin, see, empire that proceeds by adjacents, it's, you know, like this huge big empire that extended adjacently all the way to Alaska, you know, up until 1867. So over 3 continents, Europe and the northern part of Asia, all of it, the northern part of Asia, and into Alaska. And Alaska is a huge big place. I don't know why people in the United States would say, it's as big as Texas, you know, like something, a pizza as big as Texas. No, they should say a pizza as big as Alaska. Alaska is huge. So we're seeing it. And one of the big problems with empires that proceed by adjacents is they just don't give up the idea of empire very easily. They just don't. The Americans, you know, did they have something like an empire? Well, yeah. Well, you know, they had the Philippines. And you notice what happened after, or you probably haven't noticed, after World War II, as an example to the so-called colonial powers, they just gave up on the Philippines. You know, okay, you got your independence. Was it, you know, people go, oh, the Brits gave up on India because they couldn't keep it. Well, you know, the French were even worse trouble after World War II than the Brits were. And they got out of Vietnam. Oh, yeah, here you go, Vietnamese people. Here's your independent. No. They fought until they got their hind ends handed to them, their tushes handed to them in, I believe it's 1954. And in Algeria, same sort of thing. Fight. It'd been there since maybe 1830. Fight. But that was too close to being adjacent. It was like across the Mediterranean from them. Plus, it had been a part of the Roman Empire. You see how it works out? And the Romans had proceeded by adjacents. So the Greeks, although, you know, like you look at the Athenian Empire, I mean, there was one case where I think it was the island of Delos or Delos, where they presumably, or according to the accounts, wiped out all the inhabitants because they weren't cooperating with the Athenians. But generally, I think you'd find out that they were more interested in trade than doing what the Romans did. What is it? What someone once said about the Romans? Oh yeah, so proceeding by adjacents, they made a wasteland and called it peace. You know, like if you're like a Greek trader, what you do is if you make a wasteland, you can't trade with the people. Why not have them do stuff with a competitive advantage, as the economists call it, and you trade with them? The Romans weren't that way. They weren't big traders. They did trading, but they weren't like the Greeks. You notice what the Greeks were? They had these so-called empires, but they were empires of city-states. The Athenian Empire, Athens was basically a city with a small area around it. It might be the size of Warner County nowadays here in Alberta, and called Attica. And there were other, you know, Corinth was a city-state. It had a so-called empire. And, you know, different places in the Mediterranean and stuff like that. So there would be a Theban Empire. This is not Thebes in Egypt, but Thebes in the kind of central northern part of north of Athens, of Greece. And, you know, like this is the way European colonialism or empire was. Western European. It's, you got a little bit here, you got a little bit there. In the case of India, it's a huge bit to England. But England, it wasn't until about 1850 that they really tried to centralize India. It was just like wee little principalities that they had. They tended to be Muslim ruled, but that was wrong. Muslims, that's not a native religion there, and the people who'd be in control there would tend to be mixed with Turks, Afghans, Persian people, a little less Arabic. But they shouldn't have been ruling over Hindu people, and they still shouldn't be in places like Kashmir. But that's a different issue. At any rate, the Europeans had these little enclaves. Sometimes they were huge in the case of India. But very different, and they basically gave up on it in less than a generation. But you look at Putin, it's been, how long has it been? Well, it's been about a generation since they were kind of like eased out of Ukraine, and now they're back again, like a dirty shirt, like a horrible, horrible rash. No? Just a little lecture on that. Sorry to give you a lecture, but a lot of people need that lecture. We're
You
over.
still have 3 minutes if you want.
3 minutes? Okay, I don't know. I do want to talk about Joe Biden. Hey, you idiot. There are worse idiots, like I believe in new ants, like a newly formed insect. No, nuance. Okay? So there are a lot worse in this world in terms of stupidity and nastiness than Joe Biden. But you're noticing now how Putin's using the oil weapon. And he's using it selectively. He's using it quite, smartly. I don't like that term, smart. Well, we won't say sharply, but smartly. In other words, he's applying it to Poland, and which would have been allowing all sorts of stuff into the Ukraine, and Bulgaria, which I don't know if it actually even borders on the Ukraine. I think Romania does, and Moldova. But anyway, he's using the oil and natural gas weapon with them selectively. I think it would hurt his economy too much if he, and I think he even realizes that, he's a supreme fool when it comes to long-term strategic aims. But Biden, you should, you still can do it now. Talk to the Saudis, and, I know. I thought that was the police. They came cruising by.
Well, it is the police, but it's not.
It's a
guy
local that's
police.
Getting ready to
go do its police job.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of scary. You see them messing around with the garbage. Okay, some sort of drug deal is going down, or maybe there's a dead body. It's interesting neighborhood.
Interesting neighborhood.
Anyway, we'll talk about what Joe Biden should do with Saudi Arabia. But basically, what he should do is get them to open up the oil spigots, and he should help them in a significant way so that they can crush the Houthis. I'm talking about the actual militias, terrorists. I'm not talking about the people. But that's about it.
That's all you wanted to say?
Yeah. Oh, tune in. I'll have a lot more to say about that.
Okay.